What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back again with another Pound for Pound ATL. Joined as always by my main man, Jonathan. What's going on, Jonathan? How are you doing this evening?
Doing good, doing good. Looking forward to this weekend's games. All the stuff that's been going on with the DC searches, and it's been a happening time on the Twitterverse these days too. So,
Yeah, just waiting for that notification to drop. That
yep.
that we hired whoever we're going to hire, which is obviously the reason why we have come together tonight to talk about this and to talk about the potential of what this hire is going to mean. We briefly touched on it a little bit during the live streams. Since we got the news that Dean Pease, retired and was going to step away. We've floated some names back and forth and things like that, but I don't feel like we've really like had a chance to like dive into it and like really look at it and like really look at the situation as a whole because
Hmm.
we've had so much that we've needed to cover and to touch on with the season ending and all that jazz. So I felt like that the open DC position was due its due diligence, which is kind of what I want to like get into tonight. The like early reports once Pease announced his retirement is that the Falcons were going to cast a wide net for
Yep.
their DC, and then they have definitely casted casted cast casted
They
it
hit the cast.
cast a wide net for sure.
Yep.
As some of the names that have been like in circulation were Gray or Jerry Gray from Green Bay, the defensive
Hmm.
backs and passing game coordinator coach, highly respected guy in the league.
Yep.
Al Holcomb, a Wilkes disciple in a sense, like seems like a Steve Wilkes loyalist out there in Carolina. If Wilkes ends up with the job, there are major reports that Holcomb would stay, with
Right.
Wilkes. But he's been in Arizona and Cleveland and Carolina. He coached with linebackers coach for Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis and um, those guys. So
Yeah.
he's
He
been around some Hall of Fame type players. Uh,
he
with
definitely he definitely knows his way around a defense.
exactly. And then you get the Nielsen D line coach from New Orleans. That
Hmm.
makes sense with the ties to Fontenot, and
Yep.
he would be familiar with that guy. And like I mean, how the defensive line at New Orleans has played over the past few years. We don't necessarily want to pat them on the back too often, but in situations like that, you have to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the Saints as much as the next Falcon fan. I really, really do. I hate the fact that they've had such a good defense for a few years now, like a defense that I would have loved to have had. Um, so and that defensive line, like, yeah, they always seem to have some guys in the middle that can be disruptive. They always have Cam Jordan.
Right,
They've maybe struggled a little bit to find somebody. Kind of they're kind of in where we were with John Abraham, where
right.
we could get some guys up the middle, the Babineaus of the world and what have you, and then we could have John Abraham, and he was always a threat to wreck your game plan if you didn't account for him. We
Right.
just couldn't really get that other side figured out, and I think they're
Hmm.
kind of in that same boat. Davenport's kind of a
He's been hit and miss
yeah,
as as far
yeah,
he's been hot and cold. Trey Hendricks, I think was his name. I think he's
yep.
in both the
No, he's
Bengals now.
Cincinnati,
Yeah,
Cincinnati
Cincinnati.
now,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's
he's
and he's awesome.
right. But this is where like for the Saints, we always talk about the cap as a myth. It is a myth to an extent, but it does have its strays and its casualties, and him being one of them for the defensive line. Um, but they've also like put in a request for some of the bigger names
Oh
and
yeah,
have actually interviewed both of the bigger names, which I feel like in years past we haven't like when we've come up needing coordinators or whatever, we haven't necessarily taken these big swings. And the guys that I'm alluding to is the former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores,
Hmm.
and the former Denver head coach Vic Fangio. Those are probably like the two biggest names in this particular this cycle, right?
Yes.
Like Flores, like he's definitely like been in the running for some head coaching jobs, or at least has taken some head coaching interviews. Now,
Hmm.
Fangio, on the other hand, um, to my knowledge, he's only interviewed with us so far.
As far as
Um,
I know,
right. I
yeah,
don't know if
that's the
that's
only,
gonna
only one I've heard.
right. I don't know if that's going to change. I know that he has been linked to Sean Payton.
Hmm.
Like if Sean Payton resurfaces somewhere, he is one of the favorites to be his DC. But with these rumors flying around with Peyton being like heavily linked to Denver, I can't see Fangio going back to Denver, right? Like that doesn't
No,
make any sense.
no.
Now, speaking of Fangio, another guy I meant to mention before we jumped into those two big names was um, the DC for Denver.
Ejiro Evero,
Yeah, Evero.
or is it
Um,
Ejiro
Ejiro
Evero?
Evero, I think is now he's a Fangio disciple. Like,
Hmm.
so it makes sense. Like, if you're wanting a young Fangio in the sense
Hmm.
of like the scheme and that and the way he thinks, like Evero is definitely your guy. But I do like the idea that they're taking swings at some notable bigger name um, candidates. And it also brings me like to the idea that I think Arthur Smith, at least right now in his tenure, is wanting to be able to turn his back on the defense, if that makes any sense. Not like
Yeah,
he wants to ignore it and doesn't want to have to deal with it, but I think it seems like he wants somebody over there that he doesn't
yep,
have to micromanage.
yep. And I think we talked about this before. He wants to be I think the way it seems is what he would like is the Sean McVay Wade Phillips
Right.
uh,
Mhm.
relationship. I'm going to go do the offense. You do the defense. Just keep me informed.
Right.
But for all intents and purposes, whatever goes on the defensive side, you are in charge of that. And yeah, absolutely. And Fangio, Flores, Evero, all three of those guys, I would absolutely do that. For one, and two of the three have been head coaches, so
Right.
they've been in a position where they've had to be like the overlord, so to speak.
Yeah, the
So
overseer,
so
yeah.
yeah, so giving them just like here is your this is your team.
Right.
You are the head coach of the defense.
Mhm.
Being able to do that, Fangio and Flores could, will probably be in good graces with that. Evero, I would assume, would be the same way, seeing as everybody's wanting to
Yeah, I
get
was about
him
to
for head coach
yep.
interviews.
Yeah,
So,
he's getting head coach nods already. Like I know
mhm.
he's taking an interview in I think the Texans organization and the Cardinals organization is to my understanding. And there are like right now we have been blocked from interviewing him
Yep.
by the Broncos, but there are some like rumblings that like regardless of who they bring in, he doesn't want to be in that organization anymore.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting to see that dynamic play out. Um so my deal's like, when everybody's like clamoring obviously for, Fangio and Flores. So I really wanted to like, take a look at like what are the major differences like between, Fangio and a Flores. The one
So,
of the
well,
like
before we do a deep dive, before we get it into that
yeah.
really deeply here, the biggest I'll just say right now, the biggest difference between Fangio and Flores, as far as you know, they may have some different schematic differences and things
Mhm.
like that. The biggest difference, and the reason why personally I want Fangio, and I've said this on Twitter, the reason I want Fangio, although I would not be mad at either hire. But I would rather get Fangio because I personally, at least for now, I don't think Fangio necessarily wants to go back to being a head coach.
Right. Yeah, that's
Uh,
something
he,
I
he
was
he's been there, done that. Flores probably feels like he got cheated
right. Right.
um,
Got slighted
out of a
down there in Miami.
Right. So I could absolutely see both him and Evero. Again, if we land Evero, if we land Flores, if we land Fangio, if we land any one of those, I would have loved to have Jim Schwartz, but that's already
Mhm.
gone by the wayside. But
Right.
those three guys, if we get any one of those three guys, I will be perfectly happy with. But I'm pretty sure that if we get Evero or Flores, at best, they're here 3 years
Right.
as
Yep.
at best.
Yep.
I think, but I could absolutely see a Flores or Evero being here 1 or 2 years easily, and I would like to have Fangio here so that because I think he would could be here at the very least. I could see 3, 4, 5 years, and maybe at that point he's like maybe he gets the itch again. Who knows?
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so
because like the deal with like you hit the nail on the head there, and that's exactly where I was heading. Like when you're looking at Flores, or like right now, like I'm gonna like nail it down to like Flores and Fangio, because like those two to me represent the best options
mhm,
out there. Um, Guys who have a ton of experience, both as head coaching and being DCs. Like though to me, those are the bells of the ball right now. And so like comparing and contrasting what Flores and what Fangio bring to the table, one of the first things you have to note is aspirations, right? Like Flores' aspirations is definitely still, I want to be a head coach again. Like I feel like I got screwed down in Miami,
mhm.
and I got a raw deal down there. And I want to be, I want the chair again. So if you're hiring Flores, you're hiring, a guy who in a perfect situation, 2 years, 3 years tops. Especially if he turns around this, abysmal unit, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like seeing what he did down in Miami, like defensively, gives me no reason to think he wouldn't do the same thing here. They got all 3 years he was there, they got better each year on defense. Um, Now with Fangio, you have the idea that okay, you're probably going to have him until he retires. I'm not exactly sure how old Fangio is. I meant to look that up before we started
I
recording.
think we looked it up before. He's like 58, I think,
Yeah, okay,
somewhere in the late
somewhere.
50s.
So you're looking at, you know, depending on like how he feels, another 5 to 10 years coaching, and for most NFL head coaches, on a good run, you're looking at like 7 to 10 years at an organization. So, like Fangio could potentially cover the rest of like Arthur Smith's tenure here in Atlanta,
Yeah,
until he wants to retire. So that could easily to me that makes sense why that's an attractive uh, option. Now, when you turn to schematically, um, Fangio makes a lot of sense based off of what we have been doing the past 2 years. Now, Dean Pease, I think, tailored his defense here in Atlanta to the personnel that he had
hmm
because it was not a typical Dean Pease defense. You saw more creepers and like Sims than we'd seen before, but it was definitely more zone coverage versus man coverage that Dean Pease had ran in the past. So I think it was more stylistically like built for what we have here, but that lends itself to catering to what Fangio does naturally anyway.
yeah,
Um, Fangio is more of a like a two high shell, so like
hmm
not a necessarily a cover two, but a two deep shell, like running cover two, cover four, that kind of deal. He's like more of a post snap disguise, type defensive coordinator.
What? Yeah, making that quarterback hesitate because he sees one thing at the
Right.
right before the snap happens, then you morph it into something else, and now
Exactly.
the quarterback's got to be like,
Oh crap. Right.
what? Yeah.
Like
So
he's more of a, present middle of the field open and then rotate, either a safety towards the middle or, dropping a nickel corner, rolling a nickel corner towards the middle. And then like he more operates like, okay, if you're a fan and you're wanting like a super aggressive blitz happy defense, Fangio's not your guy. right? Like
Yeah.
he does more things off of like a four-man front, doing the twists and stunts at with the tackles, creating that kind of illusion.
Yeah.
Uh, as far as he doesn't blitz a lot.
It probably, I could see, and I haven't looked at, I know when he was in San Francisco, when he was there, they didn't run a ton of blitzes.
Mm-mm.
They did a lot of like four man down stuff, but they would also bring guys up and have guys drop out.
Right,
Uh, defensive linemen drop out, but and all that's just trying to be like, this is the guy I need to block, and then turns out he goes that way instead of coming
right,
where you think he's going to go. So it's all about trying to make you react on your feet
exactly.
instead of being able to scan, look, say this is what they're doing, and then that's what happens. Then you're toast as a defense.
Hmm.
So he wants to make you hesitate because now you saw what you thought you saw, and now it changes into something different, and you're like, okay, then we have to do something right this second.
Right.
And so
No, yeah, exactly. And like the great thing is like if we do end up hiring Fangio or even Evero, like that's gonna like be like selfishly in a way that's who I want from a creator standpoint because there
mhm,
is so much information out there on Fangio's system because it's the one that has like the West Coast offense pretty much like took over the NFL. Like
mhm,
every team runs, some aspects of the West Coast offense. And that's what Shanahan runs and all those guys with the gap schemes and like all that stuff like it goes in like waves. And right now like the vast majority of the NFL runs a Fangio style system. Like that's what Brandon Staley is a Fangio disciple, so that's what they run out there in LA with Aaron Donald and all them. And um, if any of y'all like hear like talk of like um, like quarters coverage and things like that, Matt, like these are the things that Fangio like revolutionized the NFL with. And so therefore a lot of people have done a ton of case studies on. So from that aspect, like I'm selfishly wanting Fangio because then, it makes our job a little easier in a sense of figuring out like what we're going to do, what type of players we need. But then that brings me to Flores, right? Flores is your aggressive coach, like is your aggressive defensive coordinator.
yeah,
Like he's the one that runs a base 3-4 and does a bunch of man coverage and cover zero, cover one, and like his philosophy is I'm going to confuse your protection.
hmm
Like like a lot of times has seven guys on the line of scrimmage
hmm
and giving you what they call a mug look and making you figure out who's dropping and who's coming. Same in a sense of like the whole like Dean P's like the creepers and the Sims, but he does it with that everybody up on the line,
yeah.
kind of deal. Which if you're wanting a more aggressive style coach, then more high powered aggressive defense, like Flores is your guy, right?
Yeah, and those kind of defenses are great until you run into the Patrick Mahomes of the world, until you run into the Tom Brady's of the, especially like these days the Mahomes, because you may be super aggressive, go after him, and then you miss him, and you
Right.
miss him, he's going to burn you hard, and that's the
Hmm.
thing, if you can the per I'm not gonna say the perfect because obviously anything can happen, but in my view, the best
Hmm.
way forward with defense, if you can, not everybody can. Okay, there's just you don't have a ton of super dominant defensive line guys out there that you can do this all the time, every time. But if you can, rushing four,
Right.
putting seven out in coverage, is the best way to, because yeah, you can still make a mistake, but generally you may not give up, like unless something, you can have breakdowns, but by and large you're going to keep try to keep everything in front of you. You may give up a chunk play, but you don't give up the touchdown, and then it gives your guys more opportunities to make a stop or get the takeaway or whatever. Whereas the hyper aggressive, like the old Seahawks,
Mhm.
um, stuff, which is where Jim Schwartz, I personally would, I like I said, he was who the guy I really wanted, because it's exciting to watch a bunch of
Mhm.
guys blitzing off the edge and blitzing off the out of the slot, and the safety blitzes, and the old Brian Dawkins just come and eat your lunch, kind of stuff. And it was like they were just overwhelming you with blitzers, and so if you can do it on a consistent basis and your guys on the back end can hold up, I love that style of defense, but maybe that's not the right way to go about it currently with who we have on the team. Um,
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point there, talking about like with who we have on the team. It's like right now, in a lot of ways, it throws certain aspects into limbo because if you get a guy like a Flores, then a space eating like Grady Jarrett becomes even more so important. Like guys who can play that 4 eye, become very important, right?
mhm,
Because that's one of like the staples of Brian Flores is having guys on the inside shoulder of the tackles, taking away the B gaps and things like that, and garnering pressure that way, and then it becomes important to like having a guy in the middle who can really take up double teams, which will allow like leave guys on the edge on one on one, you know, and so then somebody like a Rashawn Evans might be easier to keep around, right? But with a guy like Fangio, like you're going to need linebackers that can cover and that
mhm,
can eat space, and that's where Rashawn Evans isn't necessarily great at. Like you don't always want Rashawn Evans in coverage. You want him coming
no,
downhill, taking
yep,
heads off of running backs. You know, so like depending on who they hire, it really puts an interesting spin on what we're going to do in free agency and coming up in the draft. So I really hope that they get this nailed down, especially by the time the East West Shrine game rolls around, because we're coaching in that game. Like a lot of our staff is coaching in that game. Uh, so I hope by then they do get the do have a better idea what they're going to have on defense.
like things are, the Vikings, there's
Yeah.
their spot open today.
Yep.
There's more and more jobs that are opening up. So I know they said they were going to take their time. I know, and for all we know, they're waiting to see what happens in Denver,
It could be.
because potentially like Evero is their guy now. Again, Evero's getting head coaching opportunities. Is he doing the head coaching interviews just because I know, some people will do, I've heard this talked about before, they'll do interviews just to do the interview,
Right, just
to
to get the experience doing the
right.
interview and seeing what's expected of them in these interviews, like
Mhm.
and like some folks get interviews when everybody knows they're not necessarily ready to be a head coach, but they get these interviews for a few years down the road kind of thing.
Yep.
Laying
You start building the relationships,
right,
right?
you lay that groundwork. Exactly, is exactly what I was going to say. And then like there's rumors, not rumors, but it's being reported that Jerry Gray is going to interview later on this week. Um, like I think maybe tomorrow or something of that nature. Or I'm trying to see if I was trying to find it.
Oh, is it
Um,
with us?
yes. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, here it is. It says the Bears have requested permission to interview Packers defensive pass game coordinator DB's coach Jerry Gray for as yet undetermined defensive coaching position. That's interesting there because they already have a DC. Like, so
Mhm.
Gary is also interviewing this week in Atlanta for the vacant defensive coordinator position. So that seems like, that's probably going to happen tomorrow, right? So they interviewed Fangio yesterday, Flores today, Gray probably tomorrow. And,
Yeah.
outside of that, I know they put in a request for Nielsen and Holcomb. I don't know if they've interviewed those two guys yet or not.
I
Um,
want to say we have talked to Holcomb.
okay, so have we? Okay, I might have missed that one. We probably have already um, interviewed Holcomb, and we might have already interviewed um, Nielsen. I think is his name, the D line coach out of New Orleans. I don't know if you could pull that up or not, but yeah, it's what I am liking this time around is that they are taking swings, even though they don't necessarily have like the roster to lure these guys, but they're
Yep.
taking swings of, hey, look, it's almost like a blank canvas, come in
Right.
and build what you want here.
Right, and
So,
that's it depends on the person. Like
right,
somebody might want to already have the talent. They don't want to have to go get it
right.
because you never know if you're able to go get it.
Hmm.
But other guys are like, hey, this gives, like you said, gives me a clean slate. I can build this how I see fit. Assuming that's what they're telling, which I'm assuming that's what they're going to tell them. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
I would
we got the
imagine.
money. We got the money. If whatever you need, we can figure out a way to go get it for you.
Right.
Now, so it looks like Holcomb uh, completed his interview for the Falcons DC position on Tuesday.
Okay.
And what was the first name of the other guy?
Neil, Nielsen, Ryan, I don't know what is. I cannot remember what I tried to call him Rutledge earlier, and when I was talking on a space chat, I want to say it was Nielsen. In Neil,
Ryan Nielsen.
yeah, was it Ryan Nielsen?
Uh,
Maybe. Let's see.
it is right. It's Ryan Nielsen. Saints DC.
Yeah,
Ryan Nielsen.
right, right. Is he
So
co
Coda,
DC or whatever?
according to Bruce Feldman, would be interviewed. So, and that sounds. I think I remember reading that they had given him permission.
Right.
So, and at this point, all I can find is that it says that he may do it. I have not seen that he
Not
has
seeing.
yet.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm hoping that maybe by next show on like the next live stream, maybe we'll have a DC by then because that would be pretty sway. Um,
Yep.
but
Again,
we'll
that it all depends. Like if things happen with Denver, Sean
right.
Payton takes the job there. Evero is finally they're finally like, yeah, go talk to whoever you want to talk to, and then we get the interview with him, and maybe he blows us out of the water, blows it out of the
Right.
water,
Right.
and what have you. So who knows? But I'm hoping because we are getting to the end of the month where we're going to have the Shrine game, the East West game,
Yeah, you're
or
gonna have
or
the
the Senior Bowl.
right. You're gonna have the Senior Bowl. You're gonna have the Shrine Game. You're gonna have, the combine coming up and all this stuff. Like, I
Hmm.
really would like to have the DC in place, and I'm sure they would too. But I really would like to have the DC in place to figure out, hey, what are these guys that are already potential free agents like an Isaiah Oliver, a Rashawn Evans, like. Do you want to keep any of these guys? Like, that kind
Yep.
of thing. I think is relatively important. So, yeah, hopefully they won't sit on their hands, too long with this and drag it out and be left having to like promote Frank Bush or Ted Monachino. Not that I don't think either one of those guys are worth it, but if you're going to do that, I want that to be your first choice. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Not oh, I have to settle for, you know, bringing this guy up kind of thing.
yeah, and I think that like I honestly don't think that that's going to be the case.
Mhm.
Like I think we're going to get one of the guys that we want now. Whether that's the top two guys, the Flores or Fangio, don't know. Uh, could be Holcomb, could be Nielsen, could be Gray, could be a lot of different guys. So, but yeah, I think I think there are enough people out there that would look at our situation and be like, okay, I get to build it from scratch. That is a tempting offer.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think we'll be okay. And I think for Arthur Smith is sounds like anyways, he is respected out there. Like he seems to be a good, people in those circles
Mhm.
are really, complimentary of him. So I don't think there's a situation where like this dude's just a jerk and
Yeah, no,
doesn't get
I
along with
think
people. So
right. Yeah, I think that aspect will be pretty good. I was listening to a podcast today that had just randomly, I didn't realize it, but had our Bill Walsh like coaching intern from the training camp was on it.
mhm.
Yosef something or another. I can't remember his last name, or his last name might have been Yosef. Anyway, that's the name that stuck in my head. But he was the intern, the Bill Walsh like minority intern, and
Mhm.
like he was talking about how like nobody in that building was wrapped up with ego and stuff like that, and how good of an experience it was with all those guys. So that's good to hear, and should
Yeah.
be an opening place for whoever ends up being DC. All right, as
Yep.
we wrap this up, call your shot. Who you think is going to be the DC? Not who you want. What does your mind tell you? This guy's the DC.
Well, being a Falcons fan, I am used to disappointment, so I don't expect it to be the top two guys. I want it so bad to be the top two guys. Uh, I think it will probably end up being Al Holcomb.
Al
That's who I
Holcomb.
think it will probably be.
Yeah, like, and I wonder if like it's a like almost like Stockholm syndrome, in a sense of like never, oh, wish for nice things because we never get them kind of deal. I almost feel like it's going to be like the other side of like if either probably Jerry Gray, from
Jerry,
Green Bay,
yep.
him or if Nielsen ends up with an interview, like actually having an interview. I think his ties with Terry, but
Mhm.
uh but yeah, I think Jerry Gray is who I'm gonna call because that seems to be the one that anytime I look at a tweet with his name, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, good luck with that." So I'm like,
Yeah,
"Well, that's
yeah.
that's."
Well, but I also I saw Benjamin Albright.
Mhm.
I saw him on Twitter, and that was the name. I think somebody asked him like, if you had to, who do you think is probably going to be it? And he said, the name that he came back with was Jerry Gray.
Right.
So,
So we'll see how it
I
goes.
mean their defense was pretty good this year.
Yeah, and
It's I think it started off a little rough, but they found their footing and they were really good in the last half of the season. So, you know, and they were good last year too. So,
yep, that's it. Yeah, I think I won't poo poo it per se. Like you definitely want the flashy name, but whoever we end up signing, I'll give them their due diligence and dig into it and figure out what they're going to bring.
yep,
Well, folks, I appreciate y'all tuning in with us tonight. As always, y'all can follow us on Twitter. Let's see if I can get the brand stuff up. Let's see, where did it go? I don't know where I put it. It hid from me.
it's over to your left.
Ah, there it is. Bam. You were close.
Yeah.
So, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128. That's GRIMM1128. Jonathan,
At Jonathan M. Holder. You can see it there at the bottom of the screen.
there
It's
you
too
go.
long. I'm not going to worry about spelling it for you.
And keep your eye on the channel. We'll be back live on Tuesday, and we'll always just randomly be putting out things when we feel like it. And but as always, Falcons fans, rise up.
Rise up.